I figured. Okay. All right, let's see. Everything running properly. Okay. I think everything's finally ready to go. Oh. Every day it's something. So I was ready to go 20 minutes ago, but my computer wasn't. And so I'd start up, the things always start up, and then everything was running really slow. So I was trying to figure out what the problem was, and it looks like the problem was Steam. I would like to say that that seems like it's a rare case, but I want to say that Steam doesn't really support Windows 10 anymore. That may not be the case, but I seem to remember that being the case. But either way, Steam has a lot of problems on this computer. Like, on startup, it causes everything to be slow because it automatically tries to start itself an update, and that seems to be a problem for some reason. And then the error handling on this computer, I don't know whether it's something with the way this computer is currently set up or whatever. Like, it didn't seem to be this way at start when I first installed it, but Steam will have an error happen, and then it won't display it for me, so I know that something has happened, and then it just sits there in the background eating up resources until I go into Task Manager and shut it down manually. And this is a constant problem. I can't tell what the cause is without going through a bunch of error logs and doing a bunch of stuff that isn't worth the time, quite frankly. But finally figured out what was causing it, because I mean, I'd start up things and the computer would barely move, so that was obviously not going to work for streaming. But going through Task Manager and slowly shutting down things one by one, like, it didn't look like there was a problem with Steam until I realized I'd closed everything with Steam that should have been closed, and yet Steam still had a bunch of instances open. So I was like, oh, look, Steam shit the bed again. And then once I closed down all the Steam processes, everything started working properly again. Yay. Alright, so today we do what we try to do every day. Try to take over the world. Failing that, getting a good run in Link to the Past. Which one will come first? Alright, 3, 2, 1, go. How goes? It's going all right. Just started. Computer was having troubles, so it took me a while to get started. Oh, damn it. How did that... Whoosh. Just didn't walk far enough to the right. Either that or he was late on this charge. I don't know, but regardless. Yeah, me too. Oh man, I hope so too. Whoosh. Probably going to be streaming for a long time today. Not this game. This game I'm going to be doing about the same I always do, but after this, going to be doing Mugenics and since World Cup matches are on today for me, like early in the morning, I'm probably just gonna stream through. Like I have to check the schedule for what time the US match is. I don't really care that much about the Canadian match, but I mean, I want to watch it. I'm probably just gonna stream while I'm watching. But if I'm gonna do that, I can't really do a game that requires too much attention. And Mugenics is pretty much perfect for that because turn-based, so you can literally just kind of... Oh my lord. Fuck me. Come on. I just don't care. Like they... Canada doesn't have really that great of a team. I mean, being one of the home team, quote-unquote home teams. This time around, maybe they'll make out of the group, especially since it's 48 teams now, and watching yesterday's opener with Mexico and South Africa, it confirmed a couple of things for me. Like, one, Mexico's probably not good enough to win it, but they'll probably make it out of the group stage and maybe the best 16 and the best 8. 2, South Africa has no business being in this tournament. Like, the difference in the level of play between the two teams is pretty clear. And 3, like, I'm a little bit worried that referees may have a little bit outsized influence in the tournament this time, just based off of what yesterday's game looked like. Like, I didn't like the way the game was paced because I don't know how much this is the referee's fault, but like, I've never heard a referee blow the whistle that much. Outside of like when things have gotten absolutely chaotic. I mean, he's just constantly having to slow things down and stop them after, or every time South Africa got a goal kick. And it's just never-ending whistles yesterday. And the thing is, it wasn't like for fouls or anything like that. It's just trying to corral the players in between plays. And then the 3 red cards, I mean, the thing is about all 3 of those red cards, by the book, they're all supposed to be red cards. So you can't really say too much about it, but it doesn't look good when your opener ends with both teams playing with less than 11 men on the field. Especially in a match of low quality as that one was. It was a mistake to expand the field to 48 teams. Like, it's just, it has made this initial group stage, it's going to make this group stage feel meaningless. Because if you're one of the better teams in the group, like, you're going to play kind of like yesterday's game where you don't really care about goal differential because since 3 teams out of 4 from almost every group are going to make it through, like, what the hell do you care? All you care about is making it to the knockout stages anyway. And since you've got no idea what the other group's results are going to be, like, you can't really aim for an opponent. For all you know, being in first place could be worse than being in third. In terms of who your next opponent's going to be. And since they added 16 teams that would have normally never been in the tournament to the tournament, that just lowers the overall quality of the opening rounds. So you get teams like South Africa who clearly aren't good enough to be there, but they're there just because, well, you've got 48 slots now. So if you're FIFA or anybody that makes more money the more matches there are, you're probably pretty happy with it. But if you're anybody that enjoys watching high-quality soccer, like, this is not it. I mean, I'm not really sure where all the matches are. I mean, they've got them all over the U.S. and then in Mexico and Canada too. And like, honestly, I don't even know how I feel about that either, because I mean, I would imagine like the same groups don't really have to travel that far back and forth, but I mean, jet lag and things like that are a thing even within the U.S. Like just going East Coast to West Coast. Make no mistake, they have no intention of lowering the number of teams. They've been desperate to try to increase the number of teams for a while. And like the whole thing where it's like you're going to start taking third place teams out of round robin groups, and you're only going to take the third place team from 8 of 12 groups, and quote unquote take the best 8 third place teams. Like, it's immediately obvious what the problem with that idea is. This is dumb. Like, it's just another bad decision being made with the pocketbook in mind rather than the quality of the product. And it's going to end up hurting both in the end. That's a lot. I guess. I don't know actually anymore. Oh, God damn it. Oh, come on, man. What happened? So, during that dialogue, like, you've got the question at the end, the yes/no question. But there's a thing there where it's like, you have the yes/no question, but as soon as you hit yes on that, like, the dialogue ends, and then you need immediately to move down. So what you want to be doing is you want to have the down button pressed during the whole conversation, so that when that dialogue comes up, it doesn't register the down button, so you don't accidentally switch to no and get the conversation to repeat. I forgot to hold the down button, and then when the dialogue came up, I pressed it, and then because it was too late at that point, it switched from yes to no, and then when I hit the A button, alright, it's a mistake I don't usually make, but it's 2 days in a row I've done that now. Ugh. Just a dumb mistake. I don't know why I wasn't holding the down button. Actually, I do know why. It's because I was trying to mash the buttons to get through the dialogue faster. Like, usually what I'll do is, like, right up until the dialogue box right before the last one, I'll use both hands to mash buttons, but then on that one I switch over to my left hand to pressing the down button. I just forgot to do that. And by the time I did it, it was too late. On the topic of this game, you know, kind of seeing like the Ocarina Past remake, or the Ocarina the Ocarina Past, maybe they should make that game. Ocarina of Time remake coming out, and then kind of looking at it, and I'm seeing some people's reactions to it, and like, I didn't really look at the trailer that well at start, because there was really not too much to see. There's probably not very much to see in that trailer, if we're being honest. But someone kind of pointed out, like the more realistic you make Link look, he looks kind of like some kind of weird dwarf in that image from the trailer. Like, he doesn't... I mean, he looks more realistic and more human, but his proportions seem off. Like, he seems kind of stubby, you know? Yeah, honestly. A little bit kind of like a Hobbit, except for, you know, a little bit thicker through the limbs. And if you're going to make the argument he's a kid, then even for like a kid, he looks a little bit too, like, stubby. I mean, what's really weird to me, though, is like, I mean, I said it last time, too, is like, how is that game coming out this year and they showed zero gameplay in that trailer? Like, what is that? That doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, honestly, like 6 months out, like you should even have a demo ready. I don't think that's it. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's just simple as that, but like, what would it be, you know? Unless they're afraid the game looks bad. In which case, like, why not just can it at that point? Why would you release it? I'll be honest with you, like, if they were going to, like, make a new Zelda game based on one of the past ones, like, I wish they'd done this one. And just like, you know, like you don't have to make a 2D one of it. Like, how about trying to make this game into a updated version of one? Like, give this one like a 3D remaking of it. That would have been interesting and different. I don't get why they're remaking Ocarina of Time for the second time. Or remastering it. I guess is more appropriate. I mean, maybe it, I mean, who knows? Maybe it is a very different game than the original one. But if that was the case, why haven't you shown gameplay of it? You know, when the first Demon Souls came out on the PS3 back in 2009, when I was trying to sell my brother on the game, like, and like I was, you know, it was one of my first thoughts playing the game early on was, it really felt a lot like a Legend of Zelda game, but much more realistic and grounded in the way it was designed. And I've always kind of thought that it would be interesting to see a Zelda-style game made in that kind of, you know, frame, that kind of mindset. I realize for Nintendo, that's like maybe not a thing they want to do just because, you know, Zelda's always been one of their more, you know, all ages friendly IPs. But I mean, this is something Asmongold's been saying recently too, but well, maybe not recently, but I've heard him say it a few times, is he really would like to see FromSoft make a Legend of Zelda game. Like, I feel the same way. Not that Nintendo would ever let them do it, but I feel like that could really be something very special. Kind of in the same way like Chris Nolan's Batman series was, you know, a little bit different than what people expected from a Batman series, but and then ended up really good. I mean, trying to remake Zelda 1 scares me a little bit more just because there's so many gaps to fill in with that game that most people have mentally filled in on their own, that I don't know that you could make a remake of it the way that, you know, quote-unquote modern sensibilities require you to make a game that wouldn't just make everybody upset. Because I think a lot of that game, you know, when there's nothing there, people kind of fill in the gaps themselves with their own imagination. So like when you come in after the fact and kind of fill in those gaps, I think it creates some sort of, I don't know whether you want to call it cognitive dissonance or something, but it creates a disconnect for most people versus, you know, what it is they remember, because they're remembering something that was never there in the first place, but they had to, you know, put something in there themselves. And just like with the original Zelda, there's so little story and so many things that I feel like that one would be hard to remake in a quote-unquote modern sense just because there's so little to work with. Link to the Past, though, is a little bit easier because, I mean, there's an established story, everything's there, it's just, you know, it's really kind of simple and short. So I think, like, remaking a little, what would be best wouldn't be, you know, to focus on like story or anything like that, but filling out the gameplay and just kind of letting the story be what it always was. This is going to be a really garbage time. Not as bad as I thought. I'll be honest, like, I wish everybody'd kind of get away from Unreal Engine 5 and go back to developing their own engines again. Like, everybody relying on Unreal 5 has really hurt development. Because I look at Unreal 5 as Unreal 5 is a very good example of how good enough can prevent progress. Because something good enough exists, so there's no motivation to make anything better. But the thing is, like, that good enough isn't really that good. Whereas before, you know, like, most places kind of had to make their own engine to meet their needs. And so what you do when you have to make your own engine is you make it very tailored and specific to the type of stuff that you want to make. So you don't have any of the needless stuff that an engine like Unreal 5 might have for general development. And then the more specified things that you need for what it is you want to do are better optimized and better tailored to your needs. Like, I think part of the reason Capcom's doing so well lately is because Capcom's not relying on Unreal 5. Capcom went out there and made that RE engine, and because they have that, one, they're not spending money on Unreal 5 and its licenses, and two, like, it's very well tailored to what it is they want to do, so their games look better. And you know what? Like, making a game engine's hard. But pretty much everyone used to do it. And quite frankly, I think the better results than what you're getting now. I mean, the reality is, like, the people in charge of Unreal 5 should be working much harder to make that engine better than it is, but there's no motivation to, because everybody's giving them so much money already. But I mean, Unreal 5 serves a very real and concrete purpose in the games industry, and it's not something that doesn't need to exist. But its existence is also hurting the industry in some ways because, one, things aren't progressing past it, and two, it's become so ubiquitous now and so many people are using it to just pump out games that I think there's something like somewhere between 10 and 20,000 games that came out last year. And some people will hear that and say, wow, that's great. You know, like, there's so many games available. Like, I hear that and I think, wow, that's probably a lot of garbage. And it just makes it harder to find anything that's actually good. Like, I mean, you hear the term vibe coding going around a lot, and there's a reason, like, it's kind of become a bit of a pejorative, and it's because with something like making a game or making a program, you know, it's nice for it to be easier to do and simpler to do, but the easier something is to do, the easier it is to put out absolute garbage and pass it off as something competent. And when the person making the thing doesn't actually understand how the thing they made works, like, that's a problem down the line. Especially, like, if that thing becomes big or ubiquitous or, you know, relied on by anyone. Like, a lot of the reason, like, you see games now that they take up all this space, use up all this memory, but they don't really perform any better than something released 5 years ago, and they barely look better. If we're being honest, it's because the people that are making them now don't actually understand how the tools that they're using work. They just know, do this, and this outcome comes. Kind of like if you ask a person how a car works and they tell you press the gas pedal and the car goes forward. Yeah, that's not wrong, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Like, you wouldn't want the person designing your car to have that be their understanding of how a car works. I should have just kept firing. Oh, Lord. That's a bad line. Yeah, I mean, like, almost every major company used to have their own engine. Like, Square Enix used to have their own engines. Konami, like, when Kojima was still there, obviously had their engines with, like, Fox Engine and all that stuff. Sony used to have, well, Sony was the one making the hardware, so they obviously had their own dev tools. Microsoft's got their stuff from Windows because basically their Xboxes have been just dressed up Windows boxes, honestly. I mean, like, the original Xbox was literally just like a very focused PC. So there wasn't really too much to do there. And, like, that's part of the reason those early consoles for Microsoft were so popular, especially with Western devs, is because they didn't have to, like, make a bunch of new proprietary tools to be able to develop on them. Like, they could use a lot of the stuff that they were already using to develop on PC and just put it on an Xbox. Which is also why you saw so many PC-style games on the Xbox. It's because like, the infrastructure was there immediately. If you want to hear, like, one of my more tinfoil hat conspiracies concerning Microsoft, like, I don't think I was never of the opinion that Microsoft got into the games business because they wanted to be part of the industry. I was always of the opinion Microsoft got into the games business because they saw the console as a threat to their dominance in the PC market. Because, I mean, people forget this, but, you know, the PS3 had a web browser on it back in the day. Like, a pretty much functional web browser. I mean, it wasn't as good as, like, the ones you had on PCs back then just because it didn't have the support, but you could basically do almost anything you needed to on your PS3. Outside of, you know, like, word processing and things like that. But now with, like, the tools that Google has available, I mean, if you had one of those on your home console now, like, you could get by. And, like, to be honest with you, like, everything Microsoft has done since they got into the console space has not been in the best interest of consoles. All they have tried to do is pull the console base over to the PC. And it came to a culmination this generation with everything's an Xbox. So now that, you know, they replaced most of the upper brass in the Xbox division, because the brand is dying, because they killed it. You know, they're trying to make overtures to get people back. Nope, I don't. I mean, yeah, some people are going to buy into it, but all I do is like, who you kidding? And just look at how they run all their other businesses. Why do you think they would run Xbox any different? You know? Yeah, I mean, in the US especially, I think it's kind of moved in that direction. I mean, like, a lot of people still have PlayStations and Nintendo machines. Mainly because those machines had games that you couldn't get anywhere else. But, I mean, that's increasingly not the case, especially in Sony's case. I mean, Sony's release schedule this generation has been shameful. Like, I mean, people like gave the PS3 hell for not having games when that came out originally, but I mean, seriously, compare that to what you've got with the PS5 now, and PS3 looks absolutely spectacular in comparison. If you're talking about games that you can only play on the PlayStation. You know, I hear a lot of people say that, you know, console exclusivity doesn't make any sense. It doesn't benefit the consumer. I disagree entirely. That sucks. Oh man, that was fucking bullshit. Which one? The Xbox showcase? I don't know, like, for me, like, Games Fest, I didn't really see much of the... Like, this slate of games is aimed for a group of game players that doesn't include me. Like, I realize, like, most of these games, like, their fan base is out there for them, so, like, it's not like I'm not even remotely making the argument, like, that nobody's going to play any of this stuff, because that's not even remotely true. But it's just like, none of the games coming out this time really kind of got me excited, honestly. Like, like, what would I have liked to have seen? Well, okay. How about Square Enix start working on, like, the next Final Fantasy? How about, like, I have something to show for that? You know, like, Final Fantasy VII, reunion. It's not reunion. It's Revelation. Like, they should have called the game Reunion, but I think they've probably already used that name somewhere, so they can't. But anyway, I mean, that's all well and good, but let's be honest, like, that series should have been finished last year. There should have been one of those out every 2 years. Like, if you're going to do a game like that and put it into a series, it needs to be every 2 years. It needs to be done in 4 years. Otherwise, by the end of it, you're going to have lost a good chunk of your audience just because they've either quit gaming or they've just lost interest. And then Final Fantasy 16, when did that come out? Was that 2 years ago already? I would like to think that they'd be announcing the next one this year, and then it'll be out in 2 years minimum. But they can't even announce it yet. Like, you're not looking at probably another mainline Final Fantasy until 2029 at this point. Dragon Quest got announced, but considering the way the announcement was made and what was shown, like, there's no way that's coming out next year. Which means it's going to be 10 years probably, over 10 years or over 10 years between when that game was announced and when it comes out. Legend of Zelda. I like the Legend of Zelda games, but I don't really like the Breath of the Wild style ones. Like those are the open world style games. Like I have never really liked because I just feel like they waste my time. It's not that there's not fun gameplay in them. It's just that so much of what you do is moving from point A to point B. And I don't know, maybe some people like looking at scenery, but like, I want to look at scenery, like I'll go look out the front window. Like I kind of like I like the way scenery is done in the Souls games, in that it's there, it looks really nice, but it's not really there for me to, like, you know, have to traverse through as some kind of obstacle just to get from fun factor A to fun factor B. Whereas like I played Breath of the Wild, and the dungeons are shit in that game. The dungeons in that game are shit. It's like you, instead of having a nice, well-constructed big dungeon, you made a bunch of self-contained rooms. So it's just like a bunch of small puzzles, and they're spread out all over the place. And I mean, you've got like what, those 4 things that are kind of like legacy dungeons, but even those aren't really that great. Scale of those feels relatively small. Yeah, I mean, like, I get it. It's just like, I don't really like that style of game, personally. Like, that's just never been something that really got my interest. Like, I remember one of the first open world games I played was Dragon Quest Inquisition, and that might have been a mistake, because that game's really not that good. Like, that's one of the only games I've ever played where, like, I finished it and, like, I had zero desire to 100% to, like, get the platinum trophy for it. I was like, I finished that game, I was like, oh my god, I never want to play this again. Yeah, like, the Divine Beasts in Breath of the Wild, like, this, it's not like they're bad, it's just that compared to like what I would expect from like a regular Legend of Zelda dungeon, or like a Dark Souls quote-unquote dungeon, it just felt kind of small scale, honestly. And considering how much time was put into everything else, like, it's not hard to understand why. Like, that gets back to what I was talking about the other day with, like, when you do game dev, scale is important because time and money and manpower are finite resources, especially time. So everything that you decide to do is something that you are deciding not to do at the same time. So like all of the time that they put into making that big expansive world, that you can't make the argument that that doesn't take away from making those dungeons better. Unless you're saying Nintendo had more money and more time to spend on that game. And let's be real, they probably didn't. Like, most games don't come out, like, with, you know, slack in the schedule or way under budget. I'd imagine that's extremely rare if it ever happens at all. Because most of the time, if you've got extra time and slack in your budget, you're just going to put more stuff in. And like, one of the things that always kind of bugs me about Nintendo and the way that their games are perceived and reviewed is because everybody knows that, like, there is a clear bias to how Nintendo games are reviewed and perceived versus other games. It's just true. there's just no denying that. Like there's a Nintendo bump in like how critics review their games, and you can make up any reason for it. I don't really care what the reason is. It's there and it's a problem. Like whether it's just the nostalgia of the critics, it's, you know, access media tactics. I mean, the thing is, like in Japan, like that stuff's pretty bad, really, honestly. Like the way that like the ties between the companies here and the media companies here are pretty clear. Like they work hand in hand. Same way it kind of used to be in the US. Like the internet and YouTube kind of killed that, and for the benefit of everyone, honestly. But I just don't agree with the way that game has been critically perceived, personally. Like, I just don't think it's as good as everyone claimed it was at the time. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong about that, honestly. The game has held on a lot better than I would have personally expected. I mean, it sold really well too, but I mean, I bought it, I played through it. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't really like it that much. Because again, it just felt like almost the entirety of my playtime was spent traversing terrain, and that's not why I bought the game. Yeah, like Pokemon not appealing to an older generation. Good. Good. I like that Nintendo makes stuff for children. I like that Nintendo makes stuff for women. Like, Pokemon is a children's series. You know, like Animal Crossing, and I forget what the other one's called, like Tomodachi Life. I don't know what the English name is or whatever, but like, those are not made for me, and that's okay. They were never made for me in the first place. That Nintendo has been able to figure out a way to actually break into like that kind of market is actually impressive. Because they're one of the few companies that has. Like, I don't like those games don't bug me. They serve their own segment of the market. Just like, you know, like women's apparel, the existence of women's apparel as a market doesn't bug me. Like, that in and of itself isn't like moving resources away from things. But like, when you take stuff that was originally built for a certain segment of the market, and then like somebody comes from the outside and says like, no, you can't do that. Like, that's bad. And then they try to drag it into something that it never was. I.e., what's happened with pretty much every Sony franchise. It's not hard to understand why people get upset. And like, they look at Star Wars, for example, like, what happened to Star Wars shouldn't be surprised, because I think people realize it, even though they forget sometimes. Disney is a woman's brand. At the end of the day, Disney is a brand for women. Women and children. And among children, if you're going to ask which way, it's mostly for girls. So Star Wars getting bought by Disney and then them trying to drag it into like a female brand, Marvel getting bought by Disney and them trying to drag it into a female brand, it's not surprising, but it wasn't smart. Who do you think like Hannah Montana and whatever else shows used to be on the Disney Channel before? Not you or me. Like, those are supposed to be shows for teenage girls. Like, I mean, boys will watch it sometimes, probably because they thought whoever the girls in there were hot, but Just like, you know, like Dawson's Creek or honestly, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My brother used to watch that show. I'd watch it too. Like I never really liked the show, but I thought the women in it looked good. If I was going to be a Disney princess, who would I be? That's a good question, actually. If you were going to be a Disney princess, who would you be? I guess what, the one from Frozen, so I could be some strong, independent woman who don't need no man? I liked Disney World. I enjoyed my trip to Disney World. It was nice. Epcot I thought kind of sucked, but I mean... Disney World was fun. SeaWorld was fun. I mean, SeaWorld's not Disney though, but... I liked Mickey. I played Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. Honestly, never really liked Donald and Goofy, but kind of bugged me that they were my teammates in the Kingdom Hearts game. It's funny, like, I don't really remember hardly anything about the attractions in Disney World, other than riding Space Mountain. Oh, and then I think I rode the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, too. But the thing is, like, where I was from, we had a theme park there, too, and, like, those weren't really that much different than, like, the kinds of rides that I could ride there. So, like, I remember at the time not really feeling anything special about it, you know? I mean, but like, talking about Disney as a female brand, I mean, if you want a better example of that, I mean, like Japan, Jesus. Like, Disney is like the female brand over here. I mean, you'll get guys that goes to like Tokyo Disney a lot here, but I think it's just another one of those examples where like, guys aren't doing it because they like it. Guys are doing it because girls like it, you know? I mean, there are Disney adult men, but you probably don't want to meet them. And look, there's no problem with like being a fan of something. I mean, like, some of these people are just fans of Disney, they're like the same way like I'm a fan of video games. Like, that's not really that big of a deal. And it becomes a problem when like you do it to the extent of prioritizing it in front of things that shouldn't be prioritized in front of. Like when you're doing it to the extent like you're like, you know, neglecting your kids or your work, or when you're doing it to the extent that you're going into debt. I mean, that's when it becomes a problem, you know? And like even with me and like gaming, I mean, most of my hobbies, like they're hobbies, but like I also, in a certain extent, I also look at them as investments, because the thing is, like, if I were to sell all the games that I had for market value, I think I might break even over time versus all the money I've spent on them to this point. Depending, I might even make money back. Now, that money I spent on baseball cards as a kid, I don't think that's ever coming back, but who knows? I honestly think like picture technology has basically killed the chance of things like that ever having value. Like the only way like stuff like that'll ever have value again is just as if it becomes so rare and so hard to find that it's, you know, like an oddity of the past, kind of like, I don't know, like stamps or something. You know, I had a bunch of Legos when I was a kid. Like, I still had a lot of the boxes too, but for some of the sets, I know like some of the pieces got lost because, you know, like they're small and I had carpet in my house, so, you know, like sometimes you just don't see them in the carpet, and then the vacuum cleaner gets them and that's the end of that. But so like some of the sets I have like pieces or like small pieces are missing, but honestly, I doubt any of them are really worth much of anything. It's only like within that market, it's only like a limited number of things that actually have significant value, and among those, like, I think Star Wars is by far the most valuable. But I think outside of that, I mean, like, stuff has value, but it's not like, you know, crazy value. I mean, that's one of the things that I am really, really, really not very knowledgeable about. At the end of the day, though, like, the real reason that story blew up is not because... It's not because of the Legos. I mean, that aspect of it kind of made it interesting, but... if that was all it would have been over in like a week or so at most. The reason like the story is kind of held on so well is just because, and this is a problem not just in the US, I mean, it's a problem that's always persisted, but just how badly it reflected upon like the legal process in the US and how difficult it is to get, you know, a just outcome for something that seems so simple. I mean, when the Bricks and Minifix guys made the point that it would cost them more to go through court than it then the set was worth those, so they might as well give up. Like, everybody understands that. And the fact that, like, the number on it was so clear, too, because everybody kept saying $200,000. Now, you can dispute how much those Legos were actually worth, and the thing is, like, that was the alleged value of the set when he first started selling it, and they had already sold a decent portion of it, so it's really not $200,000. But that's not really the point. The point is that it's this life-changing amount of money just to be able to get justice for something that everybody knows is wrong. But the justice system basically won't do anything to help you unless you're willing to pay that price. And just how scummy the business was about it, too. And, like, that's... You know, like, I don't really have much patience or tolerance for communists, but it's a problem when, like, some of the things they're saying have a point. And how scummy, like, a lot of corporations these days act is directly responsible for why things like that, like, why ideas like communism, like, that belong in the dustbin of history won't go away. There's a lot of ideas on the left that I just, like, can't fundamentally agree with because I'm a person who believes that life works mostly based around incentive structures, leverage, and power. And I believe that, like, social service systems, especially large governmental ones, set up perverse incentive structures that end up being detrimental to society over extended periods of time because of the mindsets and actions that they incentivize. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that their reasoning behind why these things are necessary are incorrect. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, like, it used to be millionaires that everyone complains about, but, you know, now it's billionaires. But you know, millionaires and billionaires are not the cause of most people's problems, not the direct cause, but that doesn't mean that a lot of what people in that social strata are doing are not detrimental to society. You know, at one point in the U.S. history, I mean, you had, like, big problems like you've kind of got now in terms of, like, you know, unemployment and the stratification, I think that's what I'm looking for, of society along economic lines. But somehow that kind of got fixed because I think back then, quite frankly, people had better morals than they do now. And I think it was easier to appeal to the morals of people within that class than it is now. Like, the sense of like group identity and group belonging and, you know, that kind of thing, like that's really kind of been watered down a lot in Western societies. And like there is a strong case for why individualism and things like that are good, but the backside of like that kind of individualism is the I got mine attitude. And unfortunately, that's what's kind of become prevalent. Not my problem, I got mine. I mean, that's all well and good, but don't forget, like, that that stuff you have, like, having that is dependent on a social structure and a civilizational structure that doesn't depend solely on you. Like, it's important to forget, like, at the end of the day, the ultimate arbiter is violence. Like, that's not a fun thing to think about, but that's the truth. The ability to perform violence at a greater and more devastating ability than your opponent is the ultimate arbitrator at the end of the day. Like, you can make all of the logical and philosophical arguments that you want, but not going to make much difference if you're dead. So in order to form a functional society, like humans at one point came to their senses and decided, well, you know, like violence obviously is the ultimate way to decide things, but in general it produces an outcome that's detrimental to everyone involved, so maybe we don't want to go that route. So maybe we should do things in such a way that violence isn't necessary. But somewhere along the lines, like, that kind of simple concept has just gotten lost in the miasma of I got mine. Or, you know, in a lot of ways, it's a little bit of a oversimplification to say something like this, but third world thinking produces third world. And a lot of what I see as a problem in modern Western society is that that kind of thinking had at one point been mostly excised, but it's made a strong comeback in conjunction with pretzel logic. And what I mean by pretzel logic is the kind of high-minded logic that requires, like, so many mental gymnastics to work your way through that at the end, like, you're twisted into a pretzel to try to justify it, whereas, like, much simpler, and I have no idea what happened there. That was really weird. What the hell happened there? And it's like, on the first one, it whiffed, so like I was like, okay, maybe I was like too high when I threw it. Like maybe my vertical height was too high when I threw it. But the second one, like I've never thrown that second one there and had it not hit anything. That was, I don't know. Like this game does weird stuff sometimes. You know, like that, I don't know if you were there when it happened, but like one time I had it where the, that block that you push in the throne room to access the sewers, like it just wouldn't move. And like before that, the conversation that was supposed to trigger where like Zelda says something to you and then you go up there and you push the block, like that didn't trigger either before the block push. So like some kind of bug happened. Like it's just, sometimes like that kind of stuff happens in this game. All right. 3, 2, 1, go. But you'll see this kind of high-minded mental gymnastics to try to justify things that if you just break them down into a simpler concept, one, it maps much better onto the real world that everyone experiences, and two, like it's just more, I don't know what the word is, correct. Like a lot of the times, like you'll see these weird bend over backwards justifications for things, but when you try to apply the same kind of justification to something else, like it doesn't work. You know, for a principle to be a good principle, it has to be like mappable onto different situations. Like if it's not mappable onto different situations, then it's not really a principle. It's just, you know, case by case, taken to its logical extreme. Like stereotypes exist for a reason, and like, you know, like within English, like stereotype for most people is considered some kind of like pejorative or a bad word or something like that. But stereotype is originally a psychological term that has a very distinct and important meaning. And it's the idea that you can generalize things into a group or an image or an idea that allows you to not have to go through the mental taxing of, you know, like dealing with everything on a first time basis every time you see it. Now, obviously, now the reason stereotypes as a word got a negative connotation is because stereotypes can lead to undesirable outcomes because the stereotype doesn't necessarily fit the individual. But that doesn't mean that stereotypes in and of themselves are a bad thing or useless. Imagine if like every decision you had to make required you to know every little detail about every little thing that decision involves to be able to make the decision. Like, that's just not realistic. You wouldn't be able to get anything done. So you have to simplify things to a point. So like a lot of the crazy justifications for things that you'll see where it's like, you'll look at it and it seems like it's so obvious what the correct, perception of something is, but then somebody will come around and like they'll use all this logic and all these justifications for something, and if you just take it at face value, I mean, yeah, it can make sense, but it's just not realistic as a worldview that can be mapped onto everything. At the end of the day, all it is just kind of a selfish and narcissistic form of self-justification for any kind of event that anybody can do about anything. It's the I don't know if this is even word, the academization of excuse making. This is going to change topics a little bit, but on the subject of excuses, like this is something that came up a lot as when I was teaching that I had to think about a lot, and I still don't know that I have a good answer for it. What is the difference between a reason and an excuse? Like, most people don't really think about that very often, but the reason I had to think about it is, so like, the kid does something wrong. And so, in order to correct a behavior, you first have to understand the behavior and what caused it. So part of that process is obviously asking why they did what they did. Now, when a kid's explaining something, you want to hear reasons, but you don't want to hear excuses. Like, probably up to this point, like, most people would agree with the general thrust of what I'm saying here. But when the kid explains what he did, how do you differentiate between a reason and an excuse? Like, I would probably disagree with that interpretation just because any decision you make is going to involve a series of choices. And so when you make a choice, the reasoning behind that choice is important, but sometimes you can make a bad choice with a good reason. So, for example, let's see. What's a good example here of something like this? Okay, so say like, you live in a building with an auto lock on the front door, and you're at the door and you see somebody carrying like a lot of groceries, and they're waiting outside and it doesn't look like they can get themselves in. And so you let them in. Try to help them out. Doesn't seem anything wrong with that, yeah? Like, Pretty much everybody does that all the time. Turns out after the fact, that person broke into someone's apartment and then stole stuff. Now, would you say that that person, when they explain why they did it, well, I was just trying to help them out, would you call that an excuse or a reason? The thing is, like, they didn't have to do that. They're under no obligation to help that person. As a matter of fact, probably the building rules explicitly state that you're not supposed to let anybody in. And, you know, like, the reason I think a question like this is important is because, again, like, you know, when people do stuff wrong, like, you want them to take accountability. You don't want them to just, like, make up a bunch of excuses for why it's not their fault or something like that. Okay, but then people don't just do stuff on a whim. Like, more or less, there's always a reason why people do stuff. So then how do you differentiate that reason from an excuse? I mean, say that the reason they did it is because they're not very smart and, like, the logic behind their decision was just really faulty and they did something stupid. But when they explain that to you, is that a reason or an excuse? I mean, the thing is, like, anything can be avoided with, like, the proper knowledge and the proper presight, you know? But sometimes you don't have that available to you. Like in the previous example with the guy that, you know, opens the door for somebody that eventually robs someone's apartment, and they had no idea that person was going to do that. I mean, I can tie this into the stereotypes talk. Well, I screwed that up. Say it was a woman. Let's be real here. Nobody would probably suspect that a woman's going to break into somebody's apartment and steal stuff. But that happens. Probably happens more often than people think. I mean, we have this mental stereotype as the male is a criminal because that just tends to be the truth. Like, the majority of criminals are male. For a number of reasons. Yeah, because, like, with women and kids, people tend to let their guard down because there's less expectation of them doing something suspicious or problematic than there would be with an adult male. For good reason. One of the biggest reasons being that, well, quite frankly, in the event that they did cause a problem, a child or a female is much easier to deal with on a physical basis than an adult male. Like, part of the reason for that assessment is simply that fact there, alone. The risk assessment of not the potential, but the risk of what you would have to do in the case that you have to deal with this person. I think like getting back to what I was talking about before, like the sort of answer that I've come to that seems to kind of fit, but like I'm still not like completely happy with it. Like for me, like differentiating between a reason or excuse is the intent to lessen consequences. So like the statement itself isn't what differentiates it, it's the intent behind the statement. Like if someone has already accepted the consequences of what they've done, then explaining to them no longer becomes an excuse. You know? But if there hasn't been consequences decided for what's being done, an explanation that attempts to lessen those consequences or avoid them entirely qualifies as an excuse. Is like the answer that I've come to. But that puts you in an awkward situation because you can have a kid that's explaining what it is that they did and why, but because there is a difference in expectations of what consequences can be, like they think that they're explaining it with acceptance of consequences at this level versus the person who's listening to it with expectations of consequences at a different level, at a higher level. So the person explaining it just feels like it's a reason, whereas the person listening to it feels like it's an excuse. Yeah, like taking accountability. So like if someone were to say before they tell you why, like I'll take total responsibility for it and deal and, you know, accept whatever consequences may come as a result of it, then at that point, anything they're telling you doesn't really become an excuse unless it's explicitly to try to lessen the consequences that may be coming forth. There can be, like, more concrete examples of what might qualify something as an excuse versus a reason. Like, for example, if someone's explaining something starting with the words no or but, like, I think that can make something be more perceptible as like an excuse than a reason. Because I think there's an implication within an excuse that it's pushing back against something. Whereas a reason is simply an explanation of an action. Or an explanation of the cause of an action. But that was something I always thought about a lot when I was teaching and I had to discipline kids every now and then. Because like you hear like other people doing discipline, and a lot of time, like you'll hear it in any country in any language, something along the lines of "don't make excuses," you know? I mean, here's another thing that I'm just kind of thinking about off the top of my head here, but like, are excuse and justification synonyms? Do they mean the same thing? And if they don't, what's the difference? An excuse and a justification. I mean, at the end of the day, they're both reasons. Like, if you were to make a Venn diagram, like justification and excuse fall within the bigger circle of reason, I think. Like, reason is kind of like the overarching word for something that describes the impetus behind an action. Whereas, like, excuses and justifications are a little bit more narrow words within that umbrella of reason. But the question I'm bringing up here, and I think this is actually a little bit more difficult one, is like, are justifications and excuses different, or are they the same? Now, I think if you look at the roots of the words, you could make the argument that, like, a justification, like, the word just is in there. Like, there's the implication that what's being said is done in the service of demonstrating that an action was quote-unquote just or good or, you know, morally righteous. Whereas an excuse maybe doesn't do that, but who makes excuses that aren't for the purpose of proving that something was right? Is why I kind of asked the question. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's like the general mental image that people have. Like, I don't disagree with that. It's just like, it's one of those things where when you kind of get down into the weeds on it and look at the minutia of it, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. Like, as a general mental map of what an excuse is, I think that's perfectly fine. It's just that, like, when you're actually trying to discipline a person on a personal basis, like, you don't want the person to feel like they're being treated unfairly, you know? So, like, one of the worst things you can do to a person is when they try to explain to you what it is that they've done or why you don't, like, you know, listen and give them a fair shake. Like, that's one of the worst things that you can do to a person, I think. Because, one, it's not really fair to them, but two, it's going to, especially if it's a kid, it's going to shape how they view that kind of interaction going forward. Where if they feel like they're telling you their thought process and their reasoning behind it, they're trying to be honest with you, but you won't listen to them. That's going to push them into the next situation to being less honest about it. Now, what that doesn't mean is that you have to agree with what their reasoning is, or you have to accept it. But I think you have to be willing to listen to it on their terms in some respect. Like, you have to, or not on necessarily on their terms, or on, like, neutral terms. In order for them to not feel like they're being screwed, you know? I mean, the thing is, like, you're obviously going to have your situations where you're dealing with somebody that they're either, like, lying to you, or they're not serious about, you know, dealing with consequences. You know, there's some kind of disconnect there where they just are not going to be somebody that, you know, can get along in a civilized society. Like, there are people like that. And, like, with people like that, I mean, all of the listening and sympathy in the world isn't going to change anything. That was a little bit unlucky. Oh my god, this is a garbage time. I mean, even as I say that, I mean, like, the thing is, like, even with something like that, I mean, you have to be careful because, like, taking that too far leads to the current situation where now you have people saying things like, my truth. And that's, like, one of my least favorite terms. My truth. There's no such thing as my truth, there is the truth. Your truth may overlap with the truth, but at the end of the day, your truth is only a part of the overlapping the truth, assuming that your truth actually is the truth. Oh, my lord. Yeah. All right. Like you may not know anything about this at all because you don't live in the US, but like the Carmelo Anthony case that's just finished up in Texas, like that's a pretty good example of that. Where you've got people talking about their truth, and what their truth is, what they're referring to as their truth is not necessarily something that is factually untrue, but it is a personal perspective of events that happened that fall within the general umbrella of the truth. And there is a group of people that want to take those personal perspectives and deify them to the point that they override the overarching truth of a situation. Like somebody's perceptions and emotions about and feelings about a matter become more important than the facts of the matter. This is a problem.ありがとうございます。大音子さん。頑張ります。I mean, like honestly, with like topics like this, like I'm kind of loath to talk about them in some cases just because the amount of detail that needs to be involved to properly have the conversation requires more attention than I can give it in the middle of doing something like this. So I end up kind of talking a lot in like overarching terms. A few more honestly, like more generalizations than I'd like to. But hopefully like the overall thrust of what I'm trying to say is coming across. Right, that's the thing, like I think like the honest truth is, I think that the majority of people get it. But I think that within that majority, there's also a majority of that majority that get it, but understand the people are very sensitive to social cues and societal pressures, even though they may not outwardly admit it. And like what bugs me about what I see a lot, and I mean this even like years ago when I lived in the US, this was still true back then and probably always be true, but oh my lord. It's just, I never like to see a situation where it's obvious that everyone knows what the answer is, but no one's willing to say it because they're afraid of the social repercussions. Like, the whole idea of the First Amendment revolves around that. Now, obviously, like, there's governmental and, you know, other implications involved in there in terms of, you know, like, you know, criminal penalties for speech and things like that. But at the end of the day, like, the idea behind it was that you didn't want a situation where there was an obvious truth that nobody was willing to say because they were afraid of being punished. You know, like for the last few years, for the first time since I've been alive, it feels like things are finally moving it back in that direction. Versus the majority of my life where it's felt like things were moving in the opposite. But the thing is, like, even with, like, the pushback you're starting to see right now, like, with, for example, what's going on in the UK at the moment, I mean, you can't get too excited about it because the thing is, like, you haven't seen the government backlash to this yet, which is going to come. And when that comes is when you're going to find out for real which direction things are actually moving. Because there was always going to be a pushback against this at some point when things got to a breaking point. And in the UK, things got to a breaking point. But like, this isn't the answer. This is just the beginning of the question. If and when the government starts to push back on them, what are they going to do? And the government itself, like, if it's going to push back, how hard is it going to push back? You know, when those protests were going on in Iran before this war kicked off, you know, like the end of last year, early on this year, I think. You know, I've got no idea how many people were involved in it or, you know, the scale of it or anything like that because, you know, let's just be real. A lot of what comes out in the news is just propaganda. This is true of everywhere. Especially the US. Make no mistake about it, the US news has always been full of propaganda. Anyone who thinks that's not true is just naive. But assuming that what I believe happened and what probably did happen, I just don't know what scale, that when those protests started to get heavy, that Iran pushed back and took care of them in a less than peaceful manner. I think that if there was any kind of movement within Iran to actually overthrow that government, I think it ended that at that point. Like when the US and Israel came in afterwards, under the guise of whatever reason they wanted it to be for why they went in there, there's clearly some sort of expectation that the people were going to turn against the government and overthrow it. And that didn't happen. Damn it. Well, learned something there. It's definitely that I'm too high when I throw that vase. Like, I have to come down a little bit farther. I threw it over the top of his head. And okay, getting back to what we were talking about. The important thing to understand about revolutions is revolutions aren't done by like 20% of the population or 10% of the population, 5% of the population. It's usually like 1% of the population. And within that 1%, you've got a even smaller percentage of that are the actual fervent revolutionaries. Which, when it comes down to it, is maybe a few thousand people at most. So if at that point, if Iran did what some people have accused them of doing and basically got rid of most of their most fervent opposition, then it's not really a surprise that when the US and Israel came in months later, that nobody did anything. The majority of people, like, what they expect from everyday life is for things today to be mostly like they were yesterday. Beyond that, like, they don't really have very many expectations. They don't have many desires. It's why somebody that lives in a country that has next to nothing can be just as happy as somebody that lives in the US. It's why somebody in one of those countries can actually be even happier than somebody that lives in the US. Like, for most people, like, their happiness isn't determined by some kind of, you know, material measure. It's, are things going the way I expect them to go? That's why you see rich people who are absolutely miserable. So, like, when you're trying to push a revolution somewhere, like, it's why for a revolution to succeed, people have to be really uncomfortable. Unbelievable. Oh. How many times have I been swinging my sword to kill that guy? It's why revolutionaries go out of the way to make things uncomfortable for people. Because they understand this too. A comfortable populace is not going to revolt against the government. regardless of how bad that government may be. It's honestly, it's why something like the Epstein files doesn't really move the needle. Because for the average person, everything that Epstein files involves doesn't really involve them at all. At least not in a way that they understand. Not in a way that's directly perceptible. People make a lot of noise about it because it's scandalous and it's funny in some ways to see, you know, like powerful people get their, you know, their reputations ruined. But at the end of the day, like, most people don't care because they don't understand how it has anything to do with them. And in a lot of ways, they're right. But in a lot of ways, they're not right. And those ways are difficult to understand, and intentionally so. Like, people don't understand because they're not supposed to understand. And that's how people that have like a real power keep their power. You know, to give the Epstein files scandal its fair due, I think one of the reasons that it has kind of stuck out is, you know, like the Epstein stuff, nothing is new about it. Like, again, it's been going on since Clinton was president. And, well, I mean, like, just involving Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, like, the actions that we're talking about have probably been going on since well before Jeffrey Epstein was born, but the information about it was available, publicly available, for anyone to see long before it ever became a big media story. Why it took so long for it to become a media story, well, everyone is welcome to speculate on that. I don't think the answer's that difficult personally. But there's a lot of different reasons there. I don't really care to get too much into the details of it because I just don't think it's necessarily that important to the overarching point. When people think of conspiracy theories, like the reason that conspiracy theories tend to get, you know, dismissed and given a quote-unquote bad rap or whatever is because in order for most conspiracy theories to work, especially when you're dealing with the government, you're talking about a level of coordination and organization and a number of people keeping their mouths shut about something that they would obviously have to know about, that it just seems statistically improbable that you could ever get it to work without somebody blowing the lid off it, you know? Things like somebody somewhere would say something or see something. And so for the most part, like, that knowledge allows people to, you know, safely dismiss any kind of, you know, conspiratorial accusations against, you know, like large organizations like the US government. But then something like the Epstein files happens, and something that seems like it should have been impossible just because of the scale of it and the number of people involved and how long it had been going on. Like, it just seems unreasonable that it could have gotten this far and nobody has said anything. Yet here we are. You know? Like, all of it was there hiding in plain sight all the time, but then for most people, it's like, well, how come nobody ever said anything or did anything about it? And I think that at the end of the day, like, the actions of Jeffrey Epstein and the people in the files themselves aren't really what the story here is. I think the story is, how did this go on for so long and nobody really did anything about it? Like, how could that even be possible? It just seems so statistically unlikely, unfeasible, that it's just mind-boggling that it ever happened. I mean, because you're talking about, like, over that period of time, how many different presidents, how many different Congresses, like, both major parties in the U.S. having political control of it and the ability to do something about it, and yet nobody did anything. It seems like it would have been an easy slam dunk for somebody, but nobody does anything. Okay, why? And, like, that why, I think, is what really got everybody disturbed, but, like, they don't even know how to ask that question. But did they, though? I mean, there's plenty of people that probably benefited absolutely nothing from any of it. Like, quite the opposite, is even probably detrimental to them. Like, obviously, like, the women involved. you were going to make the argument that they just killed everyone? That doesn't seem likely. Like in a country where records are even remotely properly kept, like making someone disappear is not easy. Someone notices. I mean, maybe you can make a couple people disappear here and there, but when you're talking about large-scale numbers, like, not that easy. All it takes is one mistake, and then you're in a mess. Now, I'm not making the claim that there's no solution for this. I mean, there's obviously something that they were able to do because it happened. But what was it? And while we're talking about, like, ridiculous things with this case that nobody seems to point out, well, here's another ridiculous one. Assuming that these files were as scandalous as everyone claims, why the hell do they think the FBI still has them? What kind of idiot would you have to be to just keep incriminating evidence like that around for no reason? Obviously, the first thing you would do is destroy that evidence. That's why I always found the idea that there was something to see in those files preposterous. Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, like, at the scale of extortion that you'd be talking about at that point, someone somewhere eventually is going to get through the net. Like, that's the thing, where, like, on a small scale, like, yeah, I can absolutely see it. When you're dealing with, like, large scale over a period of decades, that seems extremely unlikely. Especially, like, in the era, like, 20 years ago, where internet surveillance wasn't near as good as it is now. Like, now it's easier to do it now than it would have been 20 years ago, just because of how prevalent things like smartphones are. And depending on how advanced you think, like, actual government secret programs are or whatever, like, their ability to track conversations and things like that make it potentially feasible in modern day, but back then, and, like, one of the concepts here that I think kind of applies to this situation is, like, have you ever heard the term or the phrase, like, if you owe the bank $1,000, the bank owes you, but if you owe the bank $1 million, you owe the bank? Or you own the bank? Like, when you're dealing with that many people that you're trying to blackmail, at some point, like, you can find yourself in the opposite situation to where you're so over-leveraged that if they do anything out of line, like, I mean, you're screwed. Like, with things like this, I mean, complexity doesn't scale linearly, it scales exponentially. And the more complex something gets, obviously, the more impossible it is to control and predict, which is why just like the scale of it. And this is, I mean, like, this is why so many people think that the only plausible explanation for how this could have gone on for so long is because Jeffrey Epstein was basically collecting, like, blackmail dossiers on people. Because while that might not be the best explanation, it somewhat explains this. That sucks. Oh, man. Oh, come on. This is so disappointing. Oh, my God. This fight was going so well until this last worm. Shit. I could have been up like 10 seconds if I'd... Oh. Such a wasted opportunity. Instead, I'm lost 6. I mean, at the end of the day, though, the thing about the whole Epstein thing that can't be lost is that, you know, that guy dying or getting jailed probably changed next to nothing. And that somebody like that is replaceable. People like that are a dime a dozen. Honestly, like, most of the people that might have even been implicated in the files, like, okay, you arrest them, then what? Like, I think if nothing else, like, the last 2 decades have just demonstrated to me, like, the office of the President of the United States doesn't have nearly as much power as people seem to think it does. If, like I mentioned before, politics is actually downstream from culture, then the real power isn't in politics. The real power is in whatever's driving your culture. What's driving your culture? Who's driving your culture? Like, obviously, Jeffrey Epstein and the people that would have potentially been implicated by the quote-unquote Epstein files, like, they're obviously a problem, but the bigger problem is the culture that allowed that to persist in the first place. But that gets pushed to the wayside. Almost intentionally so. Maybe we got something. So mad about that Lion Molus fight. That could have been so good. So good only getting rid of those first two, and then that third one is crap to bed. That's my fault. I had a feeling that was going to happen. It's too close. Sadly. Sadly, the furthest I've got tonight. Damn it. That one was going pretty good, too. And to be fair, I have been gambling a little bit in that fight recently. In that I have been much more willing to walk past his head to try to get at his tail faster. Just to try to save as much time as possible in that fight. And I think that's why I'm having a lot more trouble recently. Whereas before I was a little bit more willing to take what he'd give me. But the thing is, like, if you wait on him, you really bleed a lot of time in that fight. Like, it's kind of the difference between me finishing that fight and picking up 40 seconds or me finishing that fight and picking up like 25 to 30 seconds. When it works out, I put myself in a really good position for the second half of the game. But when it doesn't work out, you get that. That I do. It's part of the reason why I like this game so much. But it's alright though. I like gambling, but I'm not going to be any boss man Jack or anything like that. Oh, damn it. Oh. That was unlucky. Oh, come on. If that had killed me. Oh, but something here's probably going to kill me, though. Go! Alright. Which way is he going to go? Got impatient. Like, I did the right thing, which is when you come out of the door, you're supposed to go immediately left, and then you watch the rat, and if he goes right, then you go left and then down. If he goes up, then you go down left. If he goes any other direction, then you don't have to worry about it. And he went right, and I went left. I just tried to cut around him too quick. The only time that kind of gets hairy is like the second rat that's up against the top wall there. If they both come right, then that gap, I don't think you can actually squeeze it. I think you actually have to swing your sword there to hit that top rat. And in that case, I almost always get hit because I try to get through it without getting hit, or without having to swing my sword just to save time, but... That time was less so a gamble than just miscalculation on the timing. Alright. This is gonna be the run. May not be the run that PBs, it's gonna be the run that at least makes it to the shovel game, though. Oh man, sorry, 8:30. Wow. I'll be playing a lot of Mugenics today. Yep, I can't wait to get to the shovel game with a good time and then Just slowly watch my dreams get crushed. That had no business working as well as it did. I'm at 96% now. Yesterday I finished the all colorless cats to all bosses. Or like colorless cats to all bosses. Not all colorless cats to all bosses. Like, to get the file at 100%, like, what's left is I need to level up all of the NPCs, which is really, really grindy. Like, really grindy. So, obviously, just, like, doing runs just for the sake of doing runs is not always the most interesting thing, so... Today, I'm going to do the side quest items that I have. Like, those runs are kind of interesting. And then I'm probably going to start doing runs on hard mode too. Like, to get all the achievements on Steam, like, there's still a long way to go, but... Like, I've got like 76% on there for the achievements. But like, to get 100%, like, you've got to defeat impossible mode with every cat on all bosses. Honestly, no. It's a lot of work, and I just don't see myself playing the game long enough to get to that point. The other thing too is, like, if you want to do that too, like, you've got to do the breeding thing, and you know, somebody else kind of brought up this point with mutagenics, and I kind of agree with it. Like, I like mutagenics, but mutagenics is fun when you play it kind of the way like the devs intended you to play it, but when you get to the point where it's like, you know, like, if you just breed like the super cats, so like the ones that get 2 turns on the first round and then a bunch of other like abilities that basically allow you to wipe out the enemies before they even get a turn. I mean, that's kind of what the game is, so like, it's not like doing that is wrong or anything, but it really kind of wipes out a lot of like the quote-unquote fun with that game. Because most of the fun with that game is, you know, trying to put together ridiculous combos, or, you know, trying to navigate through it from a position of weakness rather than a position of strength. Which is why most of the stuff you see on YouTube that gets a lot of views is people doing challenge runs. So, you know, like solo cats or some kind of weird build. Or, you know, like doing it with all strays or something like that, you know? I mean, the fact that you can take a single cat on impossible mode and clear the game. I mean, it's impressive, but it also shows, like, how flexible the system is. Well, I think what's really entertaining about them is just the planning and the thought process that goes into them. But for me, like, the most entertaining runs are the ones where things don't go to plan. Where it's like you have to MacGyver the run. I don't know if you know who MacGyver is or not. You ever heard of MacGyver? Like, if you haven't, like, MacGyver... Oh, God, what am I doing? MacGyver was like a... Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, MacGyver was like a TV show from the 80s or 90s where I think it was like an ex-CIA guy or special ops or something like that. Like, he'd get put in these situations and he'd have to take, like, these everyday items to try to build some kind of crazy device to get him out of these, you know, tough situations. Yeah, something like that. And that's what's fun about Vegetics is... Like, the runs I have the most fun in are the ones where I go in without items at all. And it's... You don't know what you're going to get. But the fun is trying to take what you do get and somehow make it work. Now, don't get me wrong, like, when you've got a goal to achieve, like, that kind of run's a lot more frustrating, but... Like, when you're at the point in the game where I am right now, where you've technically achieved the main goals of the game... Like solo runs with cats with no mutations. Show me that. The thing is, like, I don't even know if that's possible. It may not actually be possible. But the thing is, like, on impossible, like, in some ways, the enemies are so powerful that if you actually let them do anything, it's kind of hard to win. What? Oh my God. Hold on, just a second. That's kind of weird. It's weird that that one arrow just went straight through him. It's also weird that he shut down so quickly, too. Don't really know what to say about that. All right. This is the run. So it's like, if this isn't the run, then like I'm never going to. Never going to be able to get this done before 9:30. Or really, technically, I think that I set the Mugenic stream for 9 o'clock, but. You know, one of the games like I really want to play that I bought on launch day and haven't touched, but it's one of the games I was most looking forward to is Unicorn Overlord. Now the name sounds weird, but if you know who Vanillaware is, like they're the people that made Dragon's Crown, and like what else did they made? They made 13 Sentinels, and I forget like what the big game that they made first. Odin Sphere. Yeah, Odin Sphere, but like they had a big game before that. I can't remember what it was. Oh, maybe it's Princess Crown. Maybe that was like their first big title. But like I always liked the kind of like the tactical games. Like my favorite game from when I was a kid was Ogre Battle, and then Tactics Ogre, and then on the PlayStation. Like I had a lot of games I liked on the PlayStation, but Final Fantasy Tactics is way up there. That was one of my favorite game narratives that Square ever made, just because I liked how well it depicted just kind of like the power dynamics between the aristocrats in that setting. And just like the really kind of bleakly pragmatic and kind of honest view of like how people would probably act in that situation. And then you've got Rams there as the protagonist who is saying all the right things, but just like within the setting, he just looks, impossibly naive, you know? I remember playing the game, and it always just kind of annoyed me, just like how naive about everything Ramza felt, even though like you knew what he was doing was the right thing to do, but it just felt just so impossibly, oblivious to the reality of the situation that he was dealing with. And then the fights in those games too, like especially like the Zodiac monster fights, like those were really well done. And obviously you can break that game a million different ways, but if you're playing that game vanilla, like the quote-unquote intended way, I mean, some of those fights were real hard. Like that Weegriff fight, I straight up thought I had screwed myself on that fight because I had saved right before the Weegriff fight. And like, if you've played that game, you know the Weegriff fight because it's a multi-stage fight, and because of the way the save system worked back then, if you saved in the middle of that multi-stage fight, there was no way to get out. So you were stuck. You either had to clear that battle or you had to start over again from whatever save file you had that was before that, or start like a brand new save file. And I was stuck on that Weegriff fight for maybe even over a day, just because it was so much harder than anything you'd done to that point, and the fact that you had to do the first part of it with Rams as solo too. Like you either had Rams that had the right abilities and setup to be able to do it and the right equipment, or you were just unbelievably screwed. Like later releases, they set it up so that you could actually go back outside of the castle, I believe. Like you could reset to before the entire sequence started. Which was how Tactics Ogre was. Like Tactics Ogre just didn't let you save in the middle of those kinds of fights. Like you either cleared them or you had to go back to the start. Like for Americans at the time, and it may have been the same case for Europeans too, because I don't think Europeans got Tactics Ogre until later anyway, but it's kind of weird to play Tactics Ogre for most Americans because they got that after Final Fantasy Tactics, and they were made by more or less the same group of people, which is why they feel so similar, but Tactics Ogre was a game made before Final Fantasy Tactics being released after Final Fantasy Tactics, so it kind of felt like it was a step backwards, but if you were playing that on the Super Nintendo, it was extremely impressive at the time. Not just like the graphics and the music and the gameplay, but just like the story for anything on the Super Nintendo at the time. Like that was another one too, where just like the storytelling in that was a lot more grounded than you tend to get in a lot of games even today. I mean, there's a reason that game is still listed as one of the best Super Nintendo games or the Super Famicom games ever released in Japan. Like, it's one of the most popular games ever released in Japan. Maybe not in terms of sales, but just in terms of, like, how people viewed the game. And honestly, what I really liked about it, and more so the Super Nintendo game versus the later releases, like, I loved the art style for the first Tactics Ogre. Like, especially the character art. Like, the later titles, the character art hasn't been bad, but like, the earlier versions of that game, like, the characters felt, you know, it wasn't like an anime style. It was a very human style of character design. You know, the faces looked real. And I always wondered, like, why that person never got more work. Ah. Oh my god. Oh, there's a couple of patterns in that room that are really easy to deal with. And then there's the other patterns. And like, what's kind of frustrating about it is it like when you're trying to kill the skeletons, like obviously when you slash the sword, they jump back, which is a problem. Yeah. Oh, don't worry about it, dude. Have a good day at work. But with those skeletons, like jumping back obviously is a thing, but like the arrows, it feels like every time you get set up to shoot an arrow, it's right when they're about to move again. So like, it's like you get in place and then you shoot it and then they move out of the way as you're shooting it. Oh, damn it. Shit. All right, I'm going to try one more time. This is the last one though. Come on, kidding me. Okay. Oh, come on. Damn it. I actually got the lamps right. Almost never happens. Couldn't see him. Yes, sir. Now that was a good land moles fight. Technically, you can get that to cycle faster, but that's probably above my pay grade. That is a gold split. Got caught looking at something else there and wasted a second. I really thought I was going in that door. Whoops. Well, that was a true 3 cycle there. Now technically you can get a 2 cycle if you're really good. I've never heard of a 1 cycle, but maybe somebody's done it before. Might be possible, but it seems like the RNG necessary to make that work is not feasible. Oh, damn it. Really thought it'd nudge me up there. A little bit too optimistic. Oh. have no words for that. Ah, damn it. Seriously, you guys are gonna just kill me climbing the mountain? Jesus, fucking unbelievable. Come on. Yeah, of course. Fucking course. Jesus Christ, this game. Oh man, that's frustrating. Oh. Oh well. Well, at least there's something positive to come out of this run. Like, that Land Molus fight here. Like, that's... What? That was almost like 6 or 7 seconds better than the previous gold split I had for that. Like, that's almost the ideal fight. I did pretty well on that one. But unfortunately, that's not enough. So anyway, that's enough of Link to the Past for today. I'll try this again tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to start a little bit earlier. Well, I don't know that, but it's going to depend on probably what time I go to sleep and soccer and things like that. But I'm going to do this again tomorrow, and hopefully I'll have a little bit better luck than I had today. Like, oh my god, that was some weird stuff today. But, I mean, some of it's my fault. Some of it's because I was talking, wasn't concentrating, but this last one was bullshit. That's frustrating, unfortunately. Alright, but as always, thanks everyone for watching. I'm going to switch over to Mugenics real quick. I'm going to go from about 9:30, so I'm going to try to switch over that as quick as I can. So, Mugenics is just going to be runs with using the side quest items, so be a little bit interesting. Probably going to go to the end and then the infinity today, assuming that I don't die. Like, if I die, well, I'll just grab a couple of these side quest items and try again. And then today's stream's going to be probably a little bit longer because I'm probably just going to try to stream through... Let me see that, actually. What time is the US match today? Let's see. Man, how's FIFA website doesn't appear in like the top 10 results for that? It's wild. $10 a.m. Okay, the Canada game's from 4 o'clock. I'm probably going to stay up to watch that, so probably be streaming through that. So it's going to be, it's going to be a little bit longer stream today, but that's what I'm going to be doing after this. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Sorry, just did not get a good run going today at all. I mean, like this last one looked like it was going to be good, but the game decided that it wasn't going to give me shit today, so it ended in a hurry. Anyway, hope to see you tomorrow, hope to see you at the next stream. If not, hope to see you tomorrow. Have a good one, folks.